titles and highlighting keywords. Add your brand logo. Add music for an emotional touch. Add your contact info on an animated business card on all your videos. Easily replace green screen with an image or a video loop. Stand out with a web page with your logo, your video at the center, and personalized button for visitors to interact. It's one tap to simultaneously upload your videos on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Always know what to say next with the BIGVU Teleprompter.
Hello and welcome to our BIGVU webinar, one of the first of 2023. I'm so delighted to be here with you today. Our webinar is Quick Connections, how to grab and keep your audience's attention. So go ahead and jump in the chat and tell me where you're joining us from. I know we have Jenn Lederer, our special guest today, who's joining us from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Where else are you all joining us? Okay, the Orlando team. Hi, Brendan. Nice to see you. Virginia Beach, Chicago. Where else do we have folks coming in from? Eloise in California. Tina from Vancouver. Boca Raton, Toronto, Thousand Oaks, Scotland, Connecticut. Excellent. It's so nice to have everybody joining us from all over the world. We have folks in London and Fairfax, Virginia, Greensboro. Anyhow, keep them coming. So excited that you all are here with us today. So, as we said at the top today, we're going to talk about grabbing quick connections, how you can grab and keep people's attention. And we're going to ask you to stay till the end because we have a couple of giveaways that we're going to talk about. One from Jenn, one from me, and then one excellent giveaway from BIGVU that you don't want to miss the opportunity. My name is Sharon Delaney McCloud. I'm a former television news anchor turned speaker, coach, and trainer. And I've been working with BIGVU for almost a year and really, really love the platform. It's been able to help me a lot with my business, and I'm sure it's helping you as well. If you haven't tried it, I would encourage you to do so. Would love during the webinar for you to add your questions to the chat. I will be able to ask Jenn on your behalf what your questions are and keep them coming throughout. We're going to stop during the content to answer those questions. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our award-winning comedian and keynote speaker, Jenn Lederer. Jenn has been featured on SiriusXM, Forbes.com, The Huffington Post, Inspiring Lives Magazine, and on stages at Yale and all over the world at comedy clubs. She's been at Google headquarters in New York City, and you can look up her schedule in the coming year to see where she'll be playing in a town near you. And with that, let's go ahead and welcome Jenn. Hey, Jenn.
Hey, Sharon. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Hi, everyone.
We're so glad that you're with us. Jenn, you're coming to us from Santa Fe, is that right?
Yes, I'm currently in Santa Fe. I also live in New York City, so I see some Queens people, some New York City people, so I'll be back there soon.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so why don't you give us a little bit of background and how you ended up doing this kind of work?
I have been in the entertainment industry in one way or another my entire life. It started with being a dancer. That's what brought me to New York. I've written off-Broadway shows, co-wrote albums. I ended up being a talent manager for a time and actually running the talent management company for 5 years, which I consider now to be kind of where I earned my master's degree in the business of show and really understanding, you know, there's the artist and then there's producing the artist and there's pitching the artist. And it's very vulnerable, as I think most people watching here understand. When you are the product, it can be difficult to really separate the business mind and the creative mind. And then it can be very dangerous to separate them too far. You know, I hear a lot of creative people say, I just don't have a business mind. And I hear business-minded people say the same thing about not being creative. And what I've found in specifically being a comedian, and because it is a storytelling medium, and you only have about 30 seconds to win an audience over before they leave you completely. It, yeah, it really requires this balance of understanding structure and business and how to pitch yourself, but also how to be vulnerable and really bring your heart to the stage without worrying about, are people going to receive this the way that I want it to be received? Versus, am I being, what's that?
We lost you for just a moment. It froze. So if you can go back to grabbing people's attention.
Yeah. You have about 30 seconds as a comedian to grab somebody's attention. And I have just learned that everybody, regardless of your industry, also comes up against that. We're all talking to humans, right? It doesn't matter if you're talking to people in the tech industry, in the finance industry, in real estate. Everybody is supposed to be telling a story, and everybody has a story to be told. It's just a matter of, can you marry that into business while holding people's attention and actually connecting, Sharon? Like that's really what I help people do. You can have the perfect script, right? I could write you the perfect script and you will sound like a robot and no one will connect with you. And that perfect script will be useless. I would rather you stumble over 15 words inside of a 30-word sentence or paragraph and connect rather than deliver a perfect script. So for me, it's, can you be in business as a human, but still have incredible structure, incredible stories, incredible, ability to pitch yourself without apologizing for taking up space, and connect as a human. That's kind of what I'm into.
So you say with that 30 seconds, it sounds like to me, as a comedian, obviously, that's, you got to get them right off the top.
Yep.
But I would have to imagine that working with your clients, for example, someone in finance.
Yeah.
Sounds awfully dry. How do you get someone to make that connection in that first 30 seconds?
Yeah. The first thing that I give people permission to do is stop trying to be so special right off the bat, right? We try to differentiate ourselves to the point where people don't know what we're saying, right? We make up titles that don't exist outside of our industry or our world. And so when people ask a simple question such as, what do? You either try to differentiate yourself so much that people have already disconnected from you, right? They're already like, I'm not following. I don't know what you mean. And in that moment, the person listening, I don't know if you know this, Sharon, but people don't like to admit often when they don't know what you're talking about, right? So that's when they'll just start robotically nodding and pretending that they understand what you mean. So that's one thing that can happen. Or you go into jargon, right? You start talking about your industry as if everybody knows your industry as well as you do. You start using words that other people do not know. And the same thing happens. They disconnect because I don't want to follow up and ask you the technical questions about your financial firm. That's not what's interesting to me. That's not what's going to connect me as a human. So the advice that I give people is, first of all, be simple. When people ask me what I do, I say I'm an award-winning comedian and I'm a keynote speaker. Those are two things that people have an idea of what I'm talking about. So I meet them where they are. I do the same thing in a comedy club. If something weird happened right before I get on stage, I better talk about it. I better acknowledge it, right? Otherwise, I'm not meeting the audience where they are, and there's the disconnect. So being simple is really underrated when it comes to talking about yourself, because we get tripped up in trying to be the most interesting person in the room. I can't stand the most interesting person in the room. Can't stand to be around the person who thinks that they are the most interesting person in the room or is clearly trying to be that. The person who's most interested, right? Interested in the person that they're talking to and genuinely interested in the work that you do. And that comes through how you tell stories, right? That doesn't come through the certifications that you have. It doesn't come through the jargon. It doesn't come through the, 6-weekend intensive that you just did that you want to tell me all about and how that awakened your soul and all. Like, stop. You know what I mean? So being interested, being simple does way more than we think it does. And this goes for in person, on stage, and online.
Jenn, so I really like just it's being interested instead of interesting. So it's almost like flipping the script, and you want to be learning about whoever it is that you're speaking with, or whoever's in the audience, or trying to solve a problem for them. Or is it really just thinking about it differently in those first connections?
Yeah, I think the main shift is thinking about it as, by the end of this conversation, I want to connect with this person. I don't want to sell them. I don't want to win them over. I don't want them to sign up for my newsletter and join my coaching program. Like we get so far ahead of ourselves in what we want to get from the person that we completely forget about that first step of, did I connect at all? And when I have random conversations with people in the airport, in the grocery store, whatever, sometimes those are the people who end up being my most engaged fans. Like, we had this random conversation. They really connected to me. They ended up saying, can I follow you or something? Like, Sharon, this happens to me more often than I would like to admit, because I'm so open and I connect with people. But that nugget of connection will lead to more opportunity than any direct, perfect elevator pitch.
Gotcha. With that in mind, would love for people to connect with us right now by asking your questions. We're getting some super feedback. Maya says, great points. Real connections are hard to find. Everything seems very surface, and we've become so accustomed to everything being introduced and relationships beginning in these little small devices. But in order to create real connections, it takes a different thought process and approach, right?
You got to be vulnerable. You got to be authentic. You have to be the one willing to look ridiculous, and again, that's the part of when you stop trying to be the most interesting person in the room, when you stop making the priority, I need to impress this person, you can start to actually be present in the conversation and listen to what the person has said to you. And to the person who said real connections are hard to find, yes and no. Number one, are you connected in that moment? Or have you also disconnected and left the conversation? We can look around and see two robots having a conversation like all the time, everywhere. Neither of them are connected. But when you allow yourself to be there, let's say I was trying to pitch you, okay? Let's say I'm at a networking event. It's like very much about business. Everyone's kind of soft pitching everywhere. And someone says, hey, Jenn, what do you do? And I say, I'm a comedian and keynote speaker. I help people story tell their career using a comedian's formula. And I watch the light go out in their eyes, right? For whatever reason, I realize this person has left the building. I will say to them, hey, we don't have to talk about that. I know you just asked me what I do because that's the script we're all like contracted to in this room. But it feels like you just completely disconnected. Is that true? And that is me meeting them where they are. And if Sharon, they are willing to be vulnerable with me in that moment, that's it. That's a wrap. They're probably going to be my best friend for the rest of that event. Because number one, they just felt seen, right? I saw them. I stopped the train, right? The momentum pitching train that I was on. I didn't just barrel through my pitch. I stopped and I saw this person and I said, we don't have to continue talking about that. And two things will either happen. They'll either say, yes, you're right. I absolutely just completely, I was doing my grocery list. I'm overwhelmed with work. There's something going on with my family. They will start emoting right then and there, telling me what's going on. Or they will say, thank you so much for catching me on that. I'm actually very interested in what you're talking about. And they just buy back in. And they are more connected to that conversation now than they ever would have been if I didn't just say, hey, do you want to take the exit? Because you're totally allowed. Because I don't need you to like me. I don't need you to need me. I don't even need you to connect with me. But that's what I'm trying to do. So that's just an example of a real conversation that happens very often, that you can utilize to actually connect with what's going on and not try to deliver your perfect pitch.
Gotcha. We have a question from James. I'm interested to hear where the line is drawn between conveying information and then being over the top with the information that you need to convey, essentially.
Okay, so there's the we're talking to a camera answer to this, and then there's we're talking to an actual person. This is easier to kind of navigate when you're talking to an actual person because of the example that I just gave. You can see when somebody is disconnecting. And what I would say to that line of giving too much information or not enough is watching their engagement with you. Really taking a temperature of their engagement with you throughout the conversation and being willing to go back, answer questions, ask them questions. Is this resonating? But then there's the video stuff. And we can talk more about the actual formula that I teach, but it's really about, can you build your information into stories so that the person that you're talking to, the audience that you're talking to, never feels like you are fastballing them as much information as you can. Why do we do that usually? Because we want to look interesting. We want to impress people, and we want to show you how much information we have because we think the information is what earns people's trust. Sometimes it is, absolutely. We need to prove that we know what we're talking about. But ultimately, the thing that's going to make them click follow, the thing that's going to make them watch your Instagram stories, actively come back to you, is because they connected to something that you said. Not necessarily because you gave them, maybe you gave them a piece of information that changed their life, and so now they are acolytes of yours and they will follow you forever. But most of the time, you told a story that was also informative, that really connected to them, and that's what made them continue.
So it sounds to me like the storytelling is really, and humans are wired to connect with story. I mean, think about all of our generations. Let's now go from, if this is video only, how do you grab your viewer's attention in that first 30 seconds? Is it using a story? Is it being very practical about looking at the little green light or the light on your monitor so they feel like they're actually looking at you? What would be your advice?
Say the thing that you're there to say first. I find that the audiences are very aware of when we are trying to utilize the algorithm, right? When we give a bunch of like teasers of what we're gonna be talking about, my people at least get very frustrated as soon as they feel like you're working them, right? You're trying to soft sell them into watching more of your video. So what I do is I tell you right up front what we are talking about. And then I will kind of reverse engineer from that point. So for example, a video that I'm going to be filming right after this interview, how vulnerability can kill your creativity. And that's how I'll start the video. Hey, I want to talk about how vulnerability can kill your creativity. That alone, if you are my kind of audience member, you're going to want to keep watching it. Some other advice will tell you, don't give that nugget right away. They'll say, code it a little bit and make them get through the first, 30 seconds of the video for the algorithm, right? Now we're talking about pleasing the machine instead of connecting with humans. So I say the first 10 seconds of you seeing me on screen should tell you exactly what you're going to get from me in the rest of however long that video is. And of course, you write it in a little bit of a way that piques curiosity, but it's ultimately giving you the answer of what I'm going to be talking about so that I don't waste your time. That is who I talk to, because I know that my ideal audience, they're very smart, they're very savvy, They're very aware of when somebody is working the system to get views and follows from them. And I don't like that contract with my audience. I like to give them as much as possible. And just like the conversation of, hey, do you want to leave? That's always my energy of like, if you're not into this, you should absolutely go, because I'm not here to convince you of anything. And the more you have that of like, you're able to leave, the more people actually opt in to stay.
All right, so I have a question here. What do you do if you feel like you don't have a great personality? Maybe you're more, I don't know, I don't want to categorize people, but maybe
Right.
people are afraid to emote on camera. How do you make that connection if it's just not your nature? I mean, you perform on stages, you're a natural
Yeah.
on stage, which then translates to being a natural on camera. What if
Yep.
that goes against everything that's natural to you? How do you make that connection, especially through video?
Yeah, this pairs very well with being vulnerable, being authentic, and not needing to be liked. Okay, there is there is an energy of, and I see this a lot in comedy. There is a reason that there's a sense of humor, right? I'm not for everybody. And there's other comedians that I see that I can sit back and be like, I see what you're doing. It's not my sense of humor, but they commit 110%, Sharon. I see people get on stage. Now, when I'm on stage, I grab the mic. I'm very physical. My dance background very much comes through. You can see it in my hands right now, right? There's other people who get on stage, they don't pick up the mic, they stand still, and they are deadpan, right? And there's a way that the first 30 seconds to a minute of them doing that, especially if they follow somebody like me who's very animated, the audience is awkward, right? The audience, you can feel the audience being like, I don't really know how to receive this. But the person is so unapologetically them that eventually you watch the room relax and start to follow what this person is saying and really buy into their deadpan delivery. So what I would say to this person, and it's absolutely something that I work with my clients, same thing with people who are convinced they're not creative, they're convinced they're not a business mind, they're convinced they don't have an on-camera personality or an on-stage personality. Everybody has a personality, right? And so what you want to do is shine a light on that personality. Don't worry about if it's a great one. Of course it's great. You've been functioning with it your entire life, I imagine. And so what we want to do is figure out the authentic you and story tell through that voice, because no one else is going to have that voice. And ultimately, that's what's going to make you great.
All right. Thank you. I have a question here. Let's see. From Susan, I have a radio show where my guests talk about their vulnerabilities, among other things. And I always share my own. And by doing that, it helps them, the listeners, engage with not only Susan, but also her guests.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess that human connection piece with that vulnerability is ultimately what helps us find the common ground.
Mm-hmm. It's not only what helps us find the common ground, but it's, again, we want our audience to be vulnerable back to us. Even if that's as simple as following us online, right? We want them to take an action that says, okay, I trust you, or I want to learn more about you. When they see us take the first step in being vulnerable, they're way more likely to follow with their own action of being vulnerable. But let me give you guys a little behind the scenes of this video that I'm going to create with how vulnerability can kill your creativity. And this is a very important filter that I use before anything gets shared with the public, whether it's on stage or online. Share from the scar, not from the wound. You know, there is so many ways that, especially with the virality possibility of content now, where people, it's such a buzzword and concept that we're talking about right now. And it's true, the more vulnerable you can be, the more people are going to connect. But if you sell yourself out right? If you tell a story or share a part of yourself that wasn't actually ready to be shared in such a big way, your creative self will shut down. And you will feel that betrayal with yourself. And it might not be obvious right away, but there is such a thing as a vulnerability hangover. There is such a thing as, even when you're ready, right, to share your story with the world, once that video goes live, once the audience is in the room, you do it. The next day you wake up and you're like, whoa, this is a different reality. I'm seen in a very different way. So when I say be vulnerable and authentic, I mean being your own biggest advocate first and never sharing anything that isn't ready. And some things will never be ready, and that's okay.
That's, yeah, share from the scar, not the wound. Indeed. And that's, yeah, so there is that line that needs to be drawn.
Absolutely. And from the audience's perspective, if you've ever seen somebody on stage or on video clearly sharing from the wound, the audience starts to want to take care of that person, right? The audience starts to become like this weird therapist energy of like, is this person okay? And you've just broken the contract with your audience that you had, because they were supposed to be able to come relax and trust you to take them on a journey. And now they're taking care of you. So you're harming yourself and you're harming your audience when you share things that aren't ready to be shared.
Jenn, you've mentioned, now you talk about this formula that you have created as a comedian, the comedian's tight 5 formula, and how this could help us all tell better stories so that we connect better. Can you go through that formula for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to make sure that I'm following my own rules, tight 5 is very much my own jargon. So a comedian's tight 5 just means 5 minutes of material. And it's really designed to give people an idea of, if you continued to follow me, what content could you expect to get from seeing a longer set, from watching my special, subscribing to YouTube, whatever. So this is very much in the energy of, you always want to leave them wanting more. Going back to that person who asked about, giving too much information, always err on the side of less information, in my opinion, because people want to have a reason to come back to you. So anyway, a tight 5 is 5 minutes of content, and I'm going to use this formula to teach you how to start storytelling your career. And this formula can be applied to a conversation like we're having right now, a podcast interview. It can be applied to interviews for jobs, and it can be applied to storytelling your content online. So the first step is what we already talked about, meeting people where they are. So from a comedian's point of view, I have 30 seconds to speak the truth in that room and make you laugh, and that has you buy in. When you're talking to somebody, when you're grabbing an audience, you are either giving them simple, here's what I am about, or here's what this video is going to be about. Give it to them as fast and as clear and as simple as possible. Now they're bought in and they have chosen to be there. They're not waiting to see if they want to stay. They've already decided that they're going to stay. That's the first step. The second step, in a comedian's formula, we pick 3 different topics to build into this 5-minute set. For me, it's usually childhood, my sexuality, and stories about traveling. Like, those are the kind of 3 things that you can expect to get from Jenn. In this formula, in your pitch formula, it's how do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? And what's next in what you do? So this is what I call like the meat and potatoes of this formula. If you work on, if you don't do step 1 or step 3, that's fine. Step 2 is really where you want to start creating and curating story after story after story. Some of them are going to be directly business oriented, and some of them are going to be personal, that underline how do you do what you do. Now, this really what you're doing when somebody says, hey, Jen, what do you do? They don't want to know the ins and outs of like the logistics of my day, and like, they usually don't want to know, what's the science between writing a joke and stuff like that. They want to know, how do I approach this industry? How do I approach? Yeah, I know about comedians, but how do you do it? This is where we start to differentiate ourselves, right? I went on a whole spiel earlier about don't be special and don't differentiate yourself. Well, now I'm flipping it completely. This is where this is where you want to start differentiating yourself and showing people how you approach your industry. I saw somebody ask a question about how does this relate to real estate specifically. And again, I work with people in finance and in tech, like the most bland, apparently no stories to be told industry. And I find all kinds of stories in there, right? How do you approach real estate? To the person who asked that, why do you do it? That's another thing that you can start to ask yourself. This can also talk to the pain points, right, of why you went into the work that you do. One of the stories that I often touch on are, several different ways that I can talk about how I didn't give myself permission to shine. I didn't give myself permission to take up space. I also didn't think I had a personality worthy of looking at ever, right? My entire 20s were just me self-sabotaging in every way, shape, and form. And so a big part of why I'm so passionate about doing this work is helping people pick up the literal or proverbial mic and take up space. Because usually the people who are extra careful about their message and not taking up space before they're ready, those are the people that need to be heard, right? The people not waiting for permission are the people that are like, can you just stop? Can we hear less of you? Can we hear less from you for a second? And then the people who are taking all of the workshops and learning all the things, and they're almost doing it. I relate to that person. I spent a decade almost doing it, right? I got my dance degree and then I left the stage for almost a decade because I truly believed on a very cellular level that it was not safe to be seen. And so when I work with people, when I talk to people about being vulnerable and sharing their stories, that's why I do it. Because I know exactly what it's like to stifle myself and my message to the point where people just did not know that I existed. And I sat back and I watched other people do it. And I would say, I could do that. I would do that way better. And, just all of the things, except I wasn't actually taking the action. So right there is just one that wasn't even a good story, Sharon, way that just by me asking, why do I do what I do? That's one story. And depending on who I'm talking to, what the room is, why I'm sharing what I'm sharing, I have probably 50 stories around how I do what I do, why I do what I do. And then this third piece, what's next? This is also where people buy in even more to your vision, because this is where we get vulnerable. We have to share about the things that haven't happened yet. Right? The things that we want to see happen in our business, the connections that we want to make in our industry or in our community. And sometimes you're talking to somebody who can actually help you do those things and you don't even know that you are. But more often than not, this is just where more of my human can show. Like I went to Greece in August and I was obviously able to visit the Acropolis, and I saw that theater and I'm like, this theater is what's next for me. Like, I want to play the Acropolis. I want to film my comedy special in the Acropolis. Does that sound ridiculous when I say it out loud? Yes. Yes, it does. Do I know anybody who books the Acropolis? Absolutely not. But when I share it, people get really excited and they're like, yeah, I could see that. That would be fun. Are you Greek? Why do you want to go there? I'm like, no, I'm not Greek. There's absolutely no connection to why I want to do
drama.
Right? You know what I mean? But there it is. Suddenly we're not in a pitch. We're just talking about things that I want to see happen, or the big stages that I want to be on to be able to help other people. And then within ourselves, it forces you to think about what's next. Oftentimes we are in the day-to-day of our business trying to figure out just what's next on Instagram. We don't take the time to think about what's next in our bigger vision for our business. And
the
again,
big goal, the big thing
right,
that you're working toward, that could be 2 years out.
Yeah, or 10 years out, or who cares? It's not my business how long that's going to take. It's my business to tap into it and to speak it and to not be afraid to look ridiculous, right? By thinking too big or whatever. I'm too big for most people, Sharon. I've gotten used to that, right? This is something that I bring into every room. But having this formula, how, why, what's next, you can build in jargon within that. You can build in your certifications. You can build in that information that is, where you got your degrees, anything that you feel is really important to the person that you're talking to. But the how, the why, and the what's next, that's what you're interested in, right? This is where we can light up. And if you asked somebody, what's your favorite meal? What's your favorite city you've ever visited? What's your favorite movie? We go right into what about those things we're so interested in, and we light up. We don't care if you agree that that's the best city or that that's the best meal or the best movie. I want you to have that energy when you're talking about your work. I do not care if you agree. This is what I'm interested in, and I'm going to light up talking about it, and you can buy in or you can leave. There's the door. I'll open it for you. Okay, so that's step 2. And then the third step, this is the other part that people have a hard time with their pitch is, how do I end it, right? A lot of times people are like, I just kind of like trail off, or worse, they apologize for everything they just said. Right? They're like, I'm sorry, I don't think that made any sense. If you can have any questions, I don't even know if I can help you. It's wild watching how people will apologize for answering a question that they were just asked to answer. So I've mentioned before about like checking the temperature of engagement. When you're coming to a close of a conversation, again, the whole point of this conversation was connecting. So you don't want to leave without checking, did we connect, right? Did you pick up what I'm putting down? So you want to end with a question that either checks, hey, what did I just say that resonated with you? Or, what can I answer about what I just said? What you don't want to do is throw that hot potato right back at them and say, so what do you do? Right? We answer that question as fast as possible, or we talk about ourselves, and then we throw the attention to somebody else. And again, that muscle that I'm working with people to build is stay there. Keep the attention on you and what you're interested in. Hold that space just a little bit longer where you're uncomfortable, because that gives them a chance to like check in and say, okay, yeah, what about this is resonating or not, right? Because we can talk about that too. So an example for my work would be, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate answering the question, what do you do? And most people have a very strong answer to that question, right? And some people give me that 10. They're like, I love it. And guess what we do then? Great. Tell me about yourself, right? It goes right into them being able to talk about themselves. Most people say, I can't stand it. Please don't ask me to talk about myself when you're done. You can just keep talking for the next hour. I would love to not. And then, of course, that opens the conversation more into what I do. So it's everything in this formula is about connection, grounding into what you're really interested in, checking to make sure that you're connected, and being present, and not trying to hurry up and be done talking. So yeah, that's it.
So we've got lots of things coming in on the chat.
Yeah, I'd love to do the how do you do step 3 on a video.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just the same as when you're talking to somebody. Leave in the comments, let me know on a scale of 1 to 10 how much you hate. That part you can really just pretend like you're talking to one person, and instead of hearing them say it back, they're going to leave it in the comments. You can also say, just like and share if you agree, like and share if you don't agree. With some of the options on Instagram and TikTok, people can stitch and respond right there. So it's really about, again, checking the connection in one way or another. And that's another thing that when you either take my workshop or work with me, I talk about how you don't want to have just one question that you ask over and over again. Number one, you're going to get real sick of that question. You're going to sound like a robot asking it. Everyone's going to know she asks that question all the time. And the same question isn't going to be appropriate in every room, right? The same joke doesn't work in every room. I have different sets for different audiences, different countries, right? Not every reference is going to land. And so that's where I differentiate myself when I'm talking to people. They can tell I didn't pre-plan most of what I said. I'm just connected to a bunch of stories that I know could work in a bunch of different scenarios. And then I pick them as I go based on the information I'm getting back. But anyway, that last step, you really just want to pretend that you're talking to a person and ask them to answer that in the comments.
Ask for the engagement. Now, there's actually just 3 steps, not 4, right? Because somebody's asking, what did you call step 4? But it's how, why, and what's next.
Yeah, the first step is giving them the information, right? Either your very clear and simple title or the concept that you're going to present in this video. Give it to them fast and loose. And then that second step is like a 3-part step: how, why, what's next. That's the actual formula. And the third step is how you get out of it, which is checking for that connection and encouraging more engagement.
I wanted to jump in and comment on one thing that you were talking about, Jenn. You mentioned you've got lots and lots of stories that you're ready to talk about when you're answering different things. Something that I read about in a book called Let the Story Do the Work for You. It's about how to tell stories in business. The author recommends that we all have a story bank. And a story bank is simply either just a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, however you want to do it, whether you even like old-fashioned writing in a moleskin notebook.
Yes, must be moleskin though.
Yeah. What's the story? Do I own that story? Is it my story or is it someone else's story?
Yes.
What audience type is this suited for?
Yeah.
Where have I already told it? Where would it work well in other scenarios? And because you think about it, especially if you're, middle-aged or later in your career, you've got dozens and dozens of stories, but sometimes you actually need to sit down and deliberately think about, all right, what happened in my first job or two that helped me find direction for the next chapter in my life, and take note of those stories. And then when you do get invited to do either a speaking engagement or a webinar or whatever, you're connecting with someone, you could say, okay, where in my story bank? Yeah, story database, Regina, exactly, exactly that.
Yes.
It can be a way to catalog those stories.
Yes, I use an app on my phone that I keep a running tab of ideas and stories that come to me. Just be prepared that when you sit down to try and think of stories, your mind will go absolutely blank. You will be meditating like you've never meditated before. Not one thought will come into your head. So you have to be prepared for these stories to come to you while you're on a walk, while you're in a shower, while you're doing the dishes, while it's not convenient at all to stop and write it down. But I promise you, you're not going to remember it. You have to stop and write it down. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is, I'll remember it. No, you won't.
Yeah, and we don't.
Write it
So
down.
what is the app? A couple people have asked. I know I use just the Notes app on my phone or Evernote. Evernote is an incredible tool because you can categorize. And frankly, most phones have apps, right? Which one do you use, Jenn?
I use Asana. It's also a project management app. So I have all my stuff, all brain dumps go into there in one category or another. And I have a running list of comedy ideas and then a running list of exactly what you're talking about, stories that align with my business and, different audiences. But these nuggets, like now your brain knows to search for stories around how, why, what's next. So watch over the next month. Let's say if you can really try to remind yourself to think about these things, what comes through while you're driving. Voice memos are going to be your best friend. See what comes through. One of the rules that I give in my workshop is no editing while these ideas come through. Just really let it stream of consciousness come through. Don't worry right away about, like with that story bank, absolutely, that is a great formula to work with. But you might not know right away where this is going to best fit or how it even connects to the bigger story. But if it resonates with you, write it down. You'll find a place for it later, or you'll cut it later. But that is none of your business right now. You really want to get used to saying yes to your brain when you're in a creative process. And editing while creating gets you into a process of saying no. And you try to make it perfect right away, which is not possible in a creative process. So you want it to be messy. You want it to make no sense. You want it to feel so random that none of these things will ever connect. Now you're headed in the right direction.
You have an online brand or presence. And when people come to you, I know we've had a couple people asking who are interested in becoming a speaker or a presenter and how they would maybe get that journey started. What would you recommend, Jenn?
Start talking. Listen, I used to ask comedians, how do I get into comedy? And they said, start doing comedy. And that was true. That was true. You have to go to open mics. You have to pick up a mic. You have to just start doing it. And it's going to be bad. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be weird. A lot of jokes aren't going to land. That's the process. And from a speaker's point of view, we have never had more mediums and opportunities to speak into a microphone and into a camera. And so it's like, are you doing it? Are you talking? Are you writing a newsletter? Are you putting these thoughts anywhere? Or are you just sitting there saying, I'm going to be a speaker. I'm going to be a speaker. And if that's where you are, listen, that's where I was for 2 years, telling people I was going to get into comedy. 2 years I threatened that. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Going to do it. Long story short, I'm not going to tell this whole story, but I went to an intuitive painting class. I painted an owl. And when I was done painting, I heard start comedy now. And that's when I started. So listen, it comes when it comes, and you have to listen to it. So if there is a part of you that's saying, I have stories to tell and I want to be a speaker. Well, my question is, why do you want to be a speaker? Do you want to be a speaker because you want to be the most interesting person in the room? Boring. What are you interested in?
Yeah, what are you trying to do with that? For sure.
Yeah. What are you interested in? Start talking about what you're interested in and see where that leads you.
You talked a lot about
note to self, paint an owl.
Yeah.
The owl has all the answers. Exactly, Anna.
Jenn, something that I feel like you touched on, when you're in person with someone, you can read the room.
Yep.
It's really hard to read the room when you're on technology, when you're looking at a dot on a laptop or a webcam.
Yep.
Do you play like mind tricks, saying, okay, I have to remember there's someone on the other side of that camera, and constantly remind yourself that you're speaking to a human through that technology?
I do. I talk to one of my girlfriends. I talk to one of my friends. I picture her. I do the same thing when I write my newsletters. I write them to her. And so and I've heard from my audience, they feel like I'm writing to them, because I never use phrases like, hi, everybody. You're not sitting there watching a video with a group of people. It's me and my phone. Who's everybody? Right? And there you go. Now I'm disconnected. You've already lost me, because now I know that you're talking to a large audience, but I thought it was just me and you. So I talk as if I'm talking to one person, because usually it's one person receiving my information. And I talk to my friend, her name's Emily, and she knows it. She knows that she's the one that gets all my information before anyone else does.
All right, I'm looking through the chat to see what questions we still have here from folks who we're getting fantastic feedback.
Great.
People are really soaking this in, drinking it in.
Good.
I like to use the word curious communicator.
Yeah.
Because communication, speaking is just 50% of communication. Listening.
Talk about it, Sharon.
Breathe, right? What is it? The Dalai Lama said, and I have that quote written in my phone somewhere, that you're never going to learn something new if you're the one doing all the talking. You can only learn when you're listening. He says it much nicer, but in a nutshell. But that's one of the things, like being a curious communicator, being interested in who it is you're speaking with or presenting to or whatever that is, right? Knowing that audience.
And that's a huge practice of learning how to read a room. Are you listening to it? Are you hearing back what it's saying or not saying? That example I gave, when I see someone check out of the conversation, I speak to that. Hey, you just left. Where'd you go? Do you want to stop talking? Because I'm listening to you, I'm seeing you, and I'm actually connecting to you. And there's nothing wrong, by the way. There's no wrong answer. You're allowed to stop listening to me. I'll keep listening to you. But yeah, I highly recommend anyone take an improv class, because it really is building a muscle of listening. You cannot predict what you're going to say in an improv group. Otherwise, you will kill the energy that's flowing through. You have to listen. It's an amazing muscle to build. Somebody asked what do I say instead of hello, everybody? And I pretty much just jump into the topic. I don't even say hi, right? It's that energy of they're scrolling through. I want to talk about how vulnerability kills your creativity. You don't need me to say hi. You need me to tell you what I'm talking about. So more often than not, I will go right into the thing, or I will say, stop. I'll just tell you to do the thing that I want you to do. Stop. I want to talk about how vulnerability, right? Because we're oddly willing to listen to a stranger online who says, stop, we'll stop scrolling. We don't even know why. We're like, okay, she told me to stop. I'll stop. So don't worry so much about saying hello. Just go right into it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good. So as we're coming down to the end of our time together, I wanted to just summarize a couple things and then talk about some of the cool things that Jenn's offering, that BIGVU's offering, and that I'll be tossing out your way as well. To summarize some of the cool things that Jenn talked about, it's all about connection, right? Making that connection. And then your formula, I love it. Meet people where they are, right? And let them know what it is they're getting themselves into. That contract, you use that word multiple times, Jenn. I think that's a really powerful way to think about time is precious. And if you're going to be spending time with this person, let's make the most of it. And as you said, that contract ensures that there's an accountability piece to it almost. Like, I don't want to waste your time. And frankly, my time, I don't want to be wasted either. So meeting people where they are. And then the three things are, you're going to be talking about how you do what you do, why you do what you do, and then what's next. Is that a fair summary of what our big takeaways are, Jenn?
Yeah, and then check for the connection at the end. Check for the engagement. Check that temperature.
Oh, don't forget about that piece. Okay, yeah. Like tying it up like a bow.
Exactly, and that's it. You're really just looking for connection. Quick ones and long ones, you know?
Sure. Now, one of the things that I saw in the scroll, and this actually leads in really nicely with the BIGVU offer, is somebody wanted to know, when you're doing a video about technology, would you use music, a music bed or any of that kind of thing? Well, guess what? What I love about the BIGVU app is it has all sorts of different music beds and things that can be suited for a very corporate kind of message or technology or finance. They actually have that. And that leads to what the offer is from BIGVU for attending this week's webinar. Everybody right now gets to walk away with 7 days free trial of all things BIGVU. And there are a load of bells and whistles within the BIGVU app, and then a load of tutorials if you don't know how to use them, that you can watch it, then make, watch it, create. And so for the next 7 days, click on the link. Bruno just popped it into the chat, and you can trial all the different things. I use the captions because we also know, Jenn, probably you know this as well, people to stop people in the scroll if they see the captions, and sometimes they don't have the the audio turned on, the captions are really helpful.
Most
And
people
then
don't listen with audio, honestly.
exactly. And the other thing too is when you're using captions, you're being more accessible. You're
Yes.
including everybody.
Yes.
Because not everybody hears. Not
That's
everybody
right.
hears well. So having those captions can be important. And again, loads of bells and whistles. So for the next 7 days, you get the full suite of features on the BigView app. And then, Jen, why don't you talk about what your workshop is that you're going to be putting out there for the world to maybe engage with you?
Yeah, so for those of you who resonated with the formula that I shared today, but you want more information on it, I have a on-demand workshop available on my website, jennlederer.com/workshop. You can take the 90-minute workshop, and at the end, you see me workshopping this formula with, I think, 6 other people, and they're all from different industries. And so you really see from the beginning of how most people do this versus how I teach it. And then once it's applied, you see the whole thing in action. It comes with downloadable PDFs. And then you have access to my calendar if you want to book a private session with me, complimentary, and we can go over what you worked on in the workshop.
Excellent. All right. So that is also in the chat, the Perfect Pitch Workshop. You'll be able to link right to that. And then my giveaway is a tip guide on how to present, communicate, whether interviewing or doing webinars or doing a keynote on virtual communication. Having done 25 years as a television news anchor, I learned a few tips and tricks to help you look, sound, and perform better on camera. Because guess what, folks? We are all TV newscasters from here on out because this virtual world is not going away. We all at some point are going to have to engage on these little screens. So why not do it better? That is also in the link for you there. Bruno has popped it into the chat. It's the virtual presenting tip sheet. So I'd love for you to download that. Hopefully it can help you with your next meeting. And with that, if there's any last few questions, please pop them into the chat. This has been recorded, so you will be able to go back and watch this on YouTube again. And then also,
Yes.
I think, Jen, it's on your social platforms as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm just trying to get the link reposted because people are saying that it's not going to the link. So I'm going to add it from my end as well. Or if Bruno, you can. So let me just get that ready. But yeah, Sharon, while I'm multitasking, thank you so much for this. You know, you did an awesome job curating this conversation. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. All right, it's correct now. The link works. The link
Thank you
works,
so
Jen.
much, everybody, for being here and for being so engaged with everything that we were doing. And yeah, get in touch with me if you want more, and follow me and like my comedy, okay? Because that's how I validate my life.
Jen, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed learning your formula and getting to know you a little bit more. I'll be following you, connecting with you,
Yes.
and really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Be on the lookout for the next webinar coming from BigVU to a camera or a phone or a laptop near you. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Now more than ever before, the way you communicate can make or break your career. Hi, I'm Sharon Delaney McCloud. I'm a television journalist turned speaker and facilitator working with leaders and their teams to amplify their impact. In our hybrid world, it's crucial to connect with each other in meaningful ways. In fact, new research shows that effective communication has become the most vital competency and non-negotiable skill that modern leaders must flex to keep their teams engaged and productivity high. I invite you to follow my content for professional development best practices, podcasts, articles, and videos that will help you drive business results. I look forward to partnering with you in person or virtually to level up what I call your power skills. Hit the link below to start a